June 9, 1954, 3:47 p.m. Senate Caucus Room, Washington, D.C. The television cameras were rolling. 35 million Americans were watching. Senator Joseph McCarthy, the most feared man in Washington, was sweating under the hot studio lights. For 4 years, he had destroyed careers with a single accusation. Senators trembled when he spoke their names. Government employees lived in terror of his investigations. Now he was cornered. Army Counsel Joseph Welch sat across from him, elderly, grandfatherly, wearing a bow tie and wire-rimmed glasses. But his voice cut like a knife. "Senator McCarthy, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness." McCarthy tried to interrupt. Welch raised his hand. "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or recklessness." The room went silent. You could hear the whir of the film cameras. Then Welch asked the question that would destroy McCarthy forever. "Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?" McCarthy opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in 4 years, Joseph McCarthy had no answer. The silence lasted 7 seconds. On television, it felt like an eternity. In the White House, President Dwight Eisenhower was watching on a small TV in his private study. His face showed nothing, but his chief of staff, sitting beside him, would later report what the president said. "Good. Let it burn." What nobody watching that moment understood, what wouldn't be revealed for 38 years, was this. Eisenhower had proof. Proof that McCarthy was right about Soviet spies and government. Proof that would have vindicated the senator. Proof that sat in a classified vault 3 miles from where McCarthy was being destroyed on television. And Eisenhower had made a cold, calculated decision. Let McCarthy die not knowing he was right. Why? Why would a president withhold evidence that could have saved a man's career? Why would Eisenhower watch innocent people destroyed when he possessed proof that could have guided proper investigations? The answer reveals one of the coldest calculations in presidential history, and it starts 3 years earlier, with a speech that changed America forever. February 9th, 1950. 8:30 p.m. The McClure Hotel, Wheeling, West Virginia. Joseph McCarthy stood at a podium in a banquet hall, addressing the Ohio County Women's Republican Club. He was 41 years old, a junior senator from Wisconsin. Nobody important, nobody famous. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket and waved it in the air. "I have here in my hand a list of 205 names, names that were made known to the Secretary of State as being members of the Communist Party, and who nevertheless are still working and shaping policy in the State Department." The room erupted. A list of communists in the State Department, 205 of them. The next morning, McCarthy's speech was front-page news across America. Senator claims 205 communists in State Department. Reporters demanded to see the list. McCarthy said he couldn't reveal it publicly. It would compromise ongoing investigations. The Truman administration demanded McCarthy provide evidence. McCarthy held press conferences, but never produced the list. Critics called it a fabrication. The Washington Post called it reckless demagogy, but Americans believed him because the world seemed to be falling apart. Just weeks earlier, Alger Hiss, a high-ranking State Department official, had been convicted of perjury. He had passed classified documents to Soviet intelligence, a spy. At the highest levels of government, in 1949, China fell to communism despite billions in American aid. The Soviets detonated an atomic bomb, years ahead of predictions. How did Stalin get the bomb so fast? Spies. Had to be spies. Klaus Fuchs, a physicist at Los Alamos, would be arrested 1 month after McCarthy's speech, confessing to passing atomic secrets to the Soviets. Another spy. In the Manhattan Project. McCarthy's accusation that Soviet agents had infiltrated the government didn't sound crazy. It sounded like the only explanation that made sense. Over the next 3 years, McCarthy became the most powerful man in Washington. More powerful than the president, more powerful than Senate leadership. He investigated the State Department, the voice of America, the Army Signal Corps, universities, Hollywood. He destroyed careers with a whisper, ruined lives with an accusation. People called before his committee lost their jobs before they testified. The accusation alone was enough. And then, in January 1953, Dwight Eisenhower became president, the general who had commanded millions, who had defeated Nazi Germany, who had seen real enemies. He looked at McCarthy and saw something different. Not a patriot. A threat. January 20th, 1953. Eisenhower's first day as president. His advisors told him, "You need to work with McCarthy. He's popular with the base. His anti-communist message resonates. You can't fight him." Eisenhower's answer was cold. "I won't fight him. I'll watch him destroy himself." His advisors were confused. McCarthy had been investigating for 3 years. He hadn't destroyed himself yet. Why would he now? Eisenhower smiled. The smile of a man who knows something you don't. "Be patient," he said. "McCarthy will overreach, and when he does, I won't save him." What Eisenhower knew, what his advisors didn't, was contained in a classified briefing he received on his second day in office. The briefing was delivered by Allen Dulles, Director of Central Intelligence. 2 words on the folder: Project VENONA. Dulles explained, since 1943, U.S. Army cryptanalysts had been intercepting Soviet intelligence cables, encrypted messages between Moscow and Soviet facilities in America. The Soviets used one-time pad encryption, theoretically unbreakable. But Soviet code clerks had made mistakes during World War II. They reused pages from one-time pads, created patterns, got sloppy under pressure. American code breakers had exploited those mistakes. Starting in 1946, a cryptanalyst named Meredith Gardner began successfully decrypting Soviet messages. Over the next several years, thousands of Soviet cables were broken. The messages revealed massive Soviet espionage networks operating in America during the 1940s. The scale was staggering. 349 Americans identified as having provided information to Soviet intelligence. The cables showed Soviet penetration of the Manhattan Project, the State Department, the Treasury Department, military intelligence, even the White House staff. The espionage had been systematic, sophisticated, devastating. Dulles showed Eisenhower examples: Antenna, atomic spy; Liberal, atomic spy; Ailes, State Department spy; Enormous, Soviet code name for Manhattan Project penetration. Everything McCarthy had been saying about Soviet infiltration, it was true. Eisenhower closed the folder. "Who else knows about this?" he asked. "Very few, Mr. President. FBI Director Hoover for specific investigations. A handful of cryptanalysts, senior intelligence officials. Does Senator McCarthy know?" "No, sir. He's never been cleared for VENONA." Eisenhower nodded slowly. Then he asked the question that would seal McCarthy's fate. "What happens if we tell him?" Dulles's answer was immediate. "Sir, McCarthy would become unstoppable." Allen Dulles explained the problem. If McCarthy learned about VENONA, he would have ironclad proof that Soviet spies had infiltrated the government. He would be vindicated. His investigations would expand. Every excess would be justified. Senator McCarthy is correct about the infiltration, Mr. President, but he's also reckless, undisciplined, and dangerous to American institutions. Eisenhower understood. McCarthy was right about the disease, but his cure was killing the patient. The senator's methods were destroying innocent people. His accusations were based on guilt by association. His bullying tactics undermined civil liberties. If Eisenhower gave McCarthy access to VENONA, the senator wouldn't just be right, he would be uncontrollable. But there was another problem. Revealing VENONA would tell the Soviets their codes had been broken. They would change their encryption systems immediately. Future intelligence would be lost. The code-breaking program was too valuable to compromise. Eisenhower made his decision in that meeting. VENONA would stay classified. McCarthy would never know the proof existed, and Eisenhower would quietly work to destroy McCarthy's career. But how do you destroy the most powerful senator in America? You can't attack him directly. That makes him a martyr. You can't defend the people he's investigating. That makes you look soft on communism. Eisenhower's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Do nothing, say nothing, defend no one. Attack no one. Just wait for McCarthy to make a fatal mistake, and then step aside and let him fall. October 1953. McCarthy's chief counsel, Roy Cohn, had a problem. His close friend, a young man named David Schine, had been drafted into the Army. Cohn wanted special treatment for Schine. Assignment to New York instead of deployment overseas. Weekend passes, excused from basic training duties. The Army said no. Schine was a private. He would be treated like any other draftee. No special privileges. Cohn was furious. He went to McCarthy. McCarthy made the worst decision of his life. He announced an investigation into communist infiltration of the United States Army. The Army, Eisenhower's institution, the place where he had spent his entire adult life, the organization he had commanded through World War II. McCarthy had just declared war on the one thing Eisenhower would never tolerate being attacked. In the White House, Eisenhower's staff was alarmed. "Sir, McCarthy is investigating the Army. You need to respond. You need to—" Eisenhower raised his hand. "Do nothing," he said quietly. "But sir, the Army will defend itself. I will not interfere." His staff was confused. Eisenhower smiled. That same cold smile from 3 years earlier. "Gentlemen, Senator McCarthy has just made his fatal mistake. Now we watch." Behind the scenes, Eisenhower gave quiet approval for the Army to fight back. The Army compiled evidence. They documented every demand McCarthy and Cohn had made for special treatment for Schein. The chronology was damning. It showed McCarthy trying to use his Senate position to benefit a friend. Public hearings were scheduled for April 1954, and here was the genius move. They would be televised. The first major Senate hearings broadcast live to American living rooms. Eisenhower's advisors were nervous. "Sir, televised hearings are unpredictable. What if McCarthy dominates?" Eisenhower remained calm, almost satisfied. "Let the hearings proceed," he said. Because Eisenhower understood something about McCarthy that nobody else did. The senator's power came from newspapers, from radio, from imagination. People read about McCarthy's accusations and imagined a patriotic crusader fighting communism. Television would show them the truth, and the truth was ugly. April 22, 1954, day one of the Army McCarthy hearings. 35 million Americans tuned in to watch. For 36 days, the hearings continued, and television revealed something newspapers never could. It showed McCarthy's actual behavior, unfiltered, unedited. He interrupted constantly. He waved documents claiming they proved conspiracies. He badgered witnesses. He seemed unable to control himself. On radio or in print, this had seemed aggressive but effective. On television, it looked like bullying. Americans watched McCarthy sweat under the studio lights. They saw the manic glint in his eye. They watched him interrupt, accuse, attack. They didn't see a patriot fighting communism. They saw a bully destroying people. The Army's chief counsel, Joseph Welch, was perfect casting. Elderly, grandfatherly, gentle manner, quiet voice. He contrasted sharply with McCarthy's aggression. And methodically, patiently, Welch dismantled McCarthy's accusations. He showed the evidence was thin. The claims were exaggerated. The methods were abusive. As the hearings continued, McCarthy grew desperate. His accusations became wilder, his attacks more vicious. America watched this deterioration in real time. McCarthy's poll numbers began dropping. And then came June 9th, the moment that would destroy McCarthy forever. June 9th, 1954, 3:47 p.m. The hearing had been grinding on for hours. McCarthy was losing. He needed to land a blow. He attacked one of Welch's young associates, Fred Fisher, who wasn't even present at the hearings. Fisher had been a member of the National Lawyers Guild years earlier. McCarthy called it a communist front organization. This was gratuitous cruelty. Welch hadn't even brought Fisher to Washington because of his past associations. McCarthy was just trying to hurt someone to score points. Welch responded with quiet devastation. His voice was pained but controlled. "Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness." McCarthy tried to interrupt. Welch continued. "Little did I dream you could be so reckless and so cruel as to do an injury to that lad." Then came the question, "Have you no sense of decency, sir?" At long last, have you left no sense of decency? The hearing room went silent, the kind of silence that suffocates, that presses down on your chest. McCarthy opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time in 4 years, Joseph McCarthy had no answer. The cameras captured everything, the sweat on McCarthy's forehead, the confusion in his eyes. The moment a bully realized he had finally gone too far. When McCarthy tried to stammer a response, Welch cut him off. "I will not discuss this further. I will not ask Mr. Cohn any more questions. You have done enough. Have you no sense of decency?" 35 million Americans watched Joseph McCarthy destroyed. Not with evidence, not with counter-accusations, with a simple question about decency. And in the White House, Eisenhower watched in satisfaction. McCarthy had finally overreached, and Eisenhower had done exactly what he promised: nothing. The impact was immediate. McCarthy's remaining public support collapsed. Politicians who had quietly supported him started distancing themselves. The Senate moved quickly. A select committee investigated McCarthy's conduct. Charges: abuse of power, contempt for Senate rules, bringing discredit to the institution. December 2nd, 1954. The Senate voted 67-22 to censure Joseph McCarthy. Half the Republican caucus voted against their colleague. The most powerful senator in America, censured by his own party. McCarthy gave a bitter speech. He claimed he was being punished for fighting communism. But the censure broke his power completely. Committee chairmen stopped returning his calls. Reporters stopped covering his accusations. Other senators avoided him in the hallways. McCarthy turned to alcohol, not for pleasure, as an anesthetic. He showed up drunk to Senate sessions, shouting at empty chairs. He gave rambling speeches to a chamber that had stopped listening. He wandered the Capitol halls like a ghost. The phone that used to ring constantly sat silent. Through all of this, Eisenhower said nothing. No defense, no acknowledgement, no admission that McCarthy had been partially right, as if McCarthy had never existed. May 2nd, 1957. Joseph McCarthy died, age 48, acute hepatitis from alcohol abuse. He was given a state funeral. 70 senators attended. Eisenhower sent condolences but didn't attend. McCarthy died believing he had been right about Soviet infiltration. He never knew how close he had come to being proven correct. The proof sat in classified vaults, 3 miles from his funeral, and would stay there for 38 more years. July 11th, 1995. Fort Meade, Maryland, NSA headquarters. The National Security Agency announced they were declassifying the VENONA files. After 50 years of secrecy, the Soviet cable decrypts would be released to the public. The Cold War had ended. The Soviet Union had collapsed in 1991. The intelligence rationale for secrecy no longer existed. Approximately 3,000 VENONA messages became public. Historians immediately recognized the significance. These were actual Soviet intelligence cables, primary source documents revealing espionage operations in unprecedented detail. The cables confirmed everything. Soviet espionage during the 1940s had been extensive and sophisticated. Hundreds of Americans had provided information to Soviet handlers. The evidence showed McCarthy's core warning about infiltration had been correct. The State Department had been penetrated. The Treasury Department, the Manhattan Project, military intelligence. But, and this was crucial, most of the spies had operated during World War II and had left government service by 1950. McCarthy claimed the house was currently on fire. VENONA proved the fire had happened years ago, and the arsonists had already fled. The most devastating revelation: government officials had possessed this evidence during McCarthy's investigations. President Eisenhower had known the truth. He had been fully briefed on VENONA. He had chosen to keep it secret. This raised the question that haunts history. Should Eisenhower have revealed VENONA? The conservative answer: yes. McCarthy deserved vindication. Proper investigations could have proceeded with actual evidence. The liberal answer: no. McCarthy's methods were indefensible, regardless of whether spies existed. The intelligence answer: no. Protecting the code-breaking program was paramount. But there's a fourth answer, the one Eisenhower actually believed. And it's the coldest calculation of all. Eisenhower didn't withhold VENONA just to protect intelligence sources. He withheld it to destroy McCarthy. The president understood that McCarthy was dangerous, not just to the people he investigated, but to American democracy itself. McCarthy's reckless methods damaged institutions. His bullying undermined civil liberties. His grandstanding made serious counterintelligence work impossible. If Eisenhower gave McCarthy access to VENONA, the senator wouldn't just be vindicated. He would be weaponized, unstoppable, uncontrollable, untouchable. So Eisenhower made a commander's decision. Sacrifice McCarthy to save American institutions. Let innocent people be destroyed in McCarthy's investigations, rather than give the senator proof that would make him invincible. Accept collateral damage to achieve the strategic objective. The cost was real. Careers destroyed, lives ruined, reputations shattered. People who had done nothing wrong, destroyed by McCarthy's accusations. And Eisenhower had proof that could have guided proper investigations. Proof that could have separated real spies from innocent people. He chose not to use it, because protecting American institutions mattered more than protecting individual lives, because eliminating McCarthy mattered more than justice for McCarthy's victims. This was leadership through calculated cruelty. The VENONA declassification revealed the full scope of Eisenhower's calculation. He had been right about protecting the intelligence source. VENONA continued producing valuable information for years. He had been right about McCarthy. The senator's methods were destroying American institutions. Someone had to stop him. But he had also allowed innocent people to be destroyed when he possessed evidence that could have helped them. The question that haunts this decision, was it worth it? Eisenhower believed yes. McCarthy had to be eliminated. VENONA had to be protected. The cost, innocent lives destroyed, was acceptable. History offers no clear answer. McCarthy died not knowing he was right. His victims died not knowing proof existed that could have saved them. And Eisenhower took the secret to his grave. The files stayed classified for 38 years after McCarthy's death. 38 years. Long enough for McCarthy to be remembered as a demagogue. Long enough for his accusations to be dismissed as hysteria. Long enough that when the truth finally came out, it was too late to matter. In June 1954, Eisenhower watched McCarthy destroyed on television. He watched a man destroyed for being right, destroyed by the president who possessed proof of it. His chief of staff asked, "Mr. President, don't you feel any sympathy?" Eisenhower's answer was cold. "I'm a soldier. Soldiers accept casualties to win wars." He stood up and turned off the television. McCarthy was a casualty. The war was for American democracy. We won. He never mentioned VENONA to McCarthy, not once. He never revealed the secret. He let McCarthy die believing he was right, but unable to prove it. And that, more than the censure, more than the alcoholism, more than the humiliation, was the cruelest act of all. To destroy a man for telling the truth, while possessing proof that he was right, and choosing, deliberately, calculatedly, to keep that proof hidden for 38 years. That was Dwight Eisenhower's decision. Cold, strategic, effective, and utterly ruthless.